Hello, and welcome to this week's Birth and Baby Talk. I'm Leanne Palmerston from Hamilton Family Doulas, and this week we're going to talk about the period of purple crying. So, first of all, if you've never heard of the period of purple crying, then you're in good company. Most people have never really heard of this kind of terminology. What they're more familiar with is the term colic. Now, colic has long been known to stand for a baby who cries intensely for 3 hours or more per day. And this particularly, there can be a lot of reasons behind that crying, but because a lot of them are also unknown reasons, then we use this term colic as a kind of catch-all. Sometimes colic means reflux, which is very, very common in newborn or very, very young infants. And what reflux is the little sphincter muscles that separate the throat from the stomach. Well, for us, they close up after we eat food so that as our body digests that food and splashes around stomach acids to break down our food, those acids, when they splash upwards, don't get into our throats, into the very, very soft and unprotected tissue there at the esophagus. But for brand new babies, sometimes that can be really immature, and then sometimes it doesn't close all the way. So that's splashing stomach acid after a baby has had a session of feeding. That can cause a lot of discomfort for babies, which can lead to crankiness overall, crying, and potentially aversions to methods of feeding. It can also lead to spitting up a lot after a feed. So if you've ever known a baby who, after being fed, who may have been laid down, then just started spitting up a lot of their milk all over themselves, that baby may have had a problem with their esophagus, whether their stomach acids were out of balance and therefore more active, or the esophagus was not closing well enough, causing all of this splashback up into the throat, causing discomfort for the baby. That is a lot of the times what we think of as colic. And if you bring your baby to the doctors and you say, my baby seems to cry more than they ought to, they seem to cry more than the average baby that I have known, your doctor is likely going to do a quick overview of baby and see if they are showing signs of general healthiness. They are generally well reactive to voices and sounds, colors, light, and that they don't have any obvious signs of illness. There's no problems with breathing. There's no problems with muscle use. There's no problems with attention. There's no problems with, recognizing their parent's face, for instance. So some cognition stuff. And there's no temperature. There's no problems with gaining weight. Often babies who do a lot of crying are great feeders. So they're nursing well, or they're taking food from a bottle really well, and they're putting on weight as expected. So when doctors rule all those things out, but baby still is quite cranky and cries often and intensely, then we will slap the term colic on it. And there's a long-standing joke that colic is a 5-letter word that means I don't know. And the thing is, we kind of do know. It's a little bit mysterious, but we do sort of know that every baby goes through what we're now starting to call the period of purple crying. So the period of purple crying, those are some very specific words that have been chosen to explain what's going on. Now, for the period of purple crying, and I'm going to refer to this fantastic website, purplecrying.info from the US, that has a lot of information available. And if you have a baby who is extremely irritable, does a lot of intense crying, then I recommend that you go to purplecrying.info and check it out. There is I'm exploring it, and it looks like there's either some free and or very inexpensive learning materials that you can tap into there. They have a program and some webinars. So I encourage you to explore that. But let me explain. Now, purple, the use of that word is because it's being used as an acronym. So purple itself stands for P, for the peak of crying. And that means that babies will start out about 2 weeks after birth, and they will start this type of crying. It reaches its peak around month 2, and then it decreases and disappears in most babies between months 3 and 5. So most babies reach a peak around 4 or 5 weeks old, and then they'll start to decrease the amount of crying until most of the crying is resolved in babies who are older than 3 months, which is good, right? It's important. The U stands for unexpected. So it seems like the crying comes out of nowhere and there's no discernible reason for it. And the R stands for it resists soothing. So it's a resistive kind of crying. You can pick your lovely baby up, and let's get Bob. Hey, Bob, will you come join us? This is Bob. If you haven't met him, he helps me teach babies or people about babies and having babies. So if you pick up your infant and you soothe them, and I like to soothe babies like this. I like to keep them close to the chest. I like to try to get their cheek up against where my heart is, so they can smell me, they can feel my warmth, they can kind of hear or feel my heartbeat through my chest, and they're kind of in the middle of my body, which is a really nice sort of safe place for babies. We call that the starter position for babies. So I get Bob and I say, hey, Bob, it's okay. You can stop crying. You're going to be okay. And I soothe them in the normal ways that I might start off soothing all babies who are upset. Now, Bob may get soothed easily that way, and the average baby who is not going through this kind of resistive crying will be probably easily soothed by being scooped up and cuddled by their caregiver. But resistant crying is when you do all the normal things that you would do to soothe your baby, but your baby is just still not soothed. You make sure that they've been fed by sitting down to feed them. You make sure that they are dry by checking and changing diapers. You make sure their temperature is good. Yeah, they're not overdressed or underdressed. They have someone to talk to, so they're not feeling lonely, and still they won't be soothed. Now that's resisting soothing. P stands for a pain-like face. So babies often will grimace, and they'll look like they're in terrible pain while they're crying. They will sound like they're hysterical. They will cry in a very intense way. And that's very typical of this purple crying. The L stands for long lasting. So these crying sessions, they can last for a long time within one session of crying. But overall, we're looking, for crying lasting for 3 to 5 hours when you put it together. Overall, that is a lot of crying. 1 hour is actually a surprisingly long period of time. And even 1 hour of crying across an entire day is a lot of crying for a baby. And that crying is going to have an effect on parents. So this is why we want to talk about this. This is why it's so important. Now, the last letter of purple is E, and this means evening. And what this stands for is that babies do their most intense crying starting in the afternoon into the evening. Now, we're not quite sure exactly why this is happening. We just know that it happens, and it happens to every baby. Some babies are a little easier to soothe, and they're a little more content overall. And so this kind of purple crying doesn't seem like a problem for some babies. For other babies at the far end of the other side of the spectrum, this intense crying can be so disruptive as to potentially trigger problems between the parents and the caregivers, such as moms developing a PTSD or trauma response to the sound of intense crying, women feeling touched out by their babies when women are doing the bulk of the caregiving and infant care for their babies. And this is why, like, this is so important, is that this crying, while it does not pose problems for the baby. So your baby is, if they are doing this kind of crying, they are not putting themselves in any danger, but it's incredibly stressful for parents because infant crying is designed by nature to trigger you into action. At its most basic, every time a baby cries, they're trying to get their needs met because they want to ensure their own safety and health. So they simply, even when babies are lonely, they're like, hello, you haven't left me in the woods all by myself and put me in danger, have you? Is anyone there? Because when we are not, in our baby's visual field, sometimes babies can forget that we exist. So, and they suddenly feel all alone. And it's so, there's lots of needs that babies are trying to get met beyond simply just being fed. And all of that taken together can just get underneath a caregiver's skin. So parents in particular, women specifically, because women on the whole are doing the bulk of the infant caring, especially in those first, that first half year of a baby's life is intensely focused between the primary caregiver, usually a mother or a mom or a woman identified person, and the baby. Now, we call this the period of purple crying because the people who came up with this idea of describing what's happening for babies this way, they wanted to signal to parents that this was a phenomenon that had a beginning and an end. When we talk about colic, it's not because it's not well defined, and it was a sort of catch-all term that people used. It didn't imply to parents that this was a condition or a circumstance that will end. And the period of purple crying helps to convey that idea for people. So again, that period is those early few months, starting at about a couple weeks after birth, usually finishing up by around 3 to 4 months, with a peak right in the middle of that, somewhere about 2 months, reaching a peak of intensity. Now, what can you do? Well, you can focus on soothing your baby, but as we pointed out, some babies don't enjoy the soothing techniques. Those soothing techniques don't necessarily address or interrupt some of that intense crying. So we recommend a couple of things. We recommend that as much as you want to, and as much as you're able to, Wear baby. Wear baby in a soft carrier, like a sling, a wrap, or a soft structured carrier around your home. Um, Anything from a baby Bjorn all the way to like a big old piece of fabric with a ring on the end is going to be helpful here. But the idea is that you sort of carry baby around in this cuddle position during the day, or if your baby is particularly wakeful at night, you can do it at night too if they won't settle to sleep. If you carry the baby here in this position, you're going to give them some of the things that they're craving in general as little tiny people. You're going to give them the social connection because you'll be able to talk to them. You'll be able to give them a sense of closeness with their parent, which will help to co-regulate their emotions. And I'm going to talk about co-regulation in a second. They are close enough to you that they can sort of smell, and they can sometimes feel or hear your heartbeat. They can hear your breathing, sometimes maybe even feel your breathing, but they can hear your breathing pattern, which all of those things do this interesting thing called co-regulate or sort of regulate the baby's nervous systems. We know that by skin-to-skin contact, we can help babies remember to keep breathing. We can help them regulate their temperature, regulate their blood sugar levels, and just to help them thrive in general. And that's why we focus on doing that with them as newborns quite a lot. But even when they're a little older, some of that skin-to-skin or extremely close near skin-to-skin contact, like near skin-to-skin, meaning I'm wearing, a little dress and my baby might be wearing their sleeper or something within a wrap. So it's near skin-to-skin, not necessarily holding them out here near me. If that makes sense. But holding them in this position is going to help them co-regulate. It's going to help to reduce the stress on their nervous system. It's going to give them a lot of hormones that will help to calm them. So it will provide them with some more endorphins and some oxytocin, both of which have a calming effect on the body. It'll be easy access for nursing. So with some practice, you can learn how to nurse sort of when you have a baby in a carrier and maybe you're just walking around your home, or you're, maybe chucking some things in the washing machine or taking a few things out of the drain board and putting them in the fridge. If you don't necessarily want to slow down and stop, although you can do that too. Let baby, settle baby into a nursing position and then just stop and take a break while they nurse is a nice thing you can do with a carrier. And then slip baby back up, have them in an upright position so that if they are having any tummy distress, they're getting a little pressure on their stomach, which helps also to soothe them. And they're allowing that gravity to help with digestion a little. So a carrier is the first thing we recommend for like super fussy babies, because it also offers you as a parent a chance to have your arms free. And that's so important, right? You want to be able to like live a normal life, to be able to move around and do stuff. And when you have a particularly fussy baby like that, it's really hard. So it's a very important component of the mental health of the caregiver to be able to do things, to be able to be productive as they define their own productivity. So that's the first thing we recommend. And the second thing that we recommend is approaching your mental health as one of the most important components in the dynamic that's going on. So you have a baby who is crying and crying intensely multiple times a day, and it is incredibly stressful on you, a caregiver. If that's the case, then we want to help you find ways of reducing your stress and helping you find ways of recontextualizing what's happening with the baby, so that every time that the baby cries, you can sort of de-escalate some of that triggering that the cry does for your own nervous system, right? So when the baby cries, they alert the parent's nervous system or the caregiver's nervous system, so that the parent or the caregiver is now feeling like anxious. Your heart starts to race. You get some adrenaline. You start to feel maybe a little bit sweaty, a little bit nervous, and you have an overwhelming urge to help the baby calm down. And so when that happens, when you're getting triggered multiple times a day, that can be really, really hard on your nervous system. Like if we've learned anything from this pandemic and the series of lockdowns, the series of restrictions, and the periods of uncertainty and fear that we've all gone through as an entire global society, if there's one thing we have learned is that sometimes these things that are happening around us are experienced as trauma by us. And even when we don't intellectually recognize that what is happening is traumatizing to us, we do end up having a trauma response. It's happening. It's why, no matter even though you feel like maybe you're living a mostly normal life, some days you just feel like, I just can't do it. I can't talk to anyone, or I can't, today I am not showering, or I just need an extra day off this week to do nothing and think about nothing, because we are craving so much self-care to soothe all this underlying current of low-level trauma we're experiencing. Now, if you're a new parent, your levels of trauma are a little higher if you've got a baby who is crying what feels like constantly. So what we recommend in this case is that you turn to this amazing tool. It's going to sound a little wooey, this amazing tool that we're learning more and more and more about now to help reduce stress. We're looking at mindful meditation. I feel like if we can link up all the little dots on a journey here, I just feel like as an entire society, we're just completely moving towards meditation and mindfulness practices as being kind of like the thing everyone's going to do. Just like everyone stops for a coffee or a refreshment or breakfast. Breakfast is a thing in the morning. We all do it. Eventually, mindful meditation is going to be a thing. We're going to all start practicing a little bit of mindfulness. But here's the thing. Mindfulness is like brain exercises, but it's not like brain exercises that necessarily make you smarter. It's like brain exercises that help you regulate your nervous system better. And this really, truly is probably the ultimate in self-care. So if you're finding yourself becoming upset really frequently because your baby cries very frequently and cries very intensely and resists soothing, you're going to first respond to the baby without bringing in a sense of sort of franticness or upset on your part as much as possible. You want to reflect outwards if you can, calm to the baby, because that's going to help the baby also get regulated. But you're also going to then turn around and look at yourself and see your heart is racing. By the way, I'm sorry, I just realized I have paper towels stuffed into my bra because it's really hot in my century-old home that doesn't have air conditioning. I just saw that on the camera, so I thought that was weird and thought I'd address it. So I want you to recognize, that's the mindfulness part. I want you to recognize what's happening in your body, what's happening in your heart, what's happening in your mind. I want you to hear what you're thinking. And I want you to start to come up with words to describe what's happening to you and what's happening to your baby. And you can talk out loud to the baby during this as well. So we've got Bob, and Bob is very upset. Now, Bob is a very quiet baby in general, but let's imagine that Bob is crying very intensely. And so I can say, oh, Bob, you're very upset right now. I hear you crying, and I hear how upset you are. And you're right here. You're right here with me. I've got you. And I'm upset too. I can feel, holy moly, my heart is really racing. So let's take a little breath together, Bob. Let's get nice and relaxed. And then I want you to employ whatever strategy works best for you. Now, for me, I love listening to music, and I love listening to books, audiobooks, and I love listening to podcasts. So when I'm feeling pretty crappy, I might put on some music, and then maybe I might dance around the house. Now, Bob might still be crying, but what I'm doing is I'm regulating my emotions. You know, that phrase, put your own mask on first. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to regulate my own emotions. I'm trying to down regulate those stress feelings that I'm having as I attempt to soothe or be a soothing presence for Bob. So I can dance around, and I can sing to him, and I can say, hey, mommy needs a coffee, so let's go and make a nice little cold brew coffee. And I'm gonna talk to my baby, and he might soothe down, he might calm down, or he might not. That's okay, because what I'm going to do is when he's intensely crying like that, and I know that his other needs have all been met, and so this is likely just straight up purple crying, I'm going to focus on myself while caring for him. Does that make sense to you guys? I hope so. So I think the most important thing to wrap up is to recognize that all babies go through this. If your baby is one of the babies who are on the far side of the spectrum, where they're intensely crying 3 to 5 or longer hours per day, they resist soothing, they have the intensity of their crying like it's really bad in the afternoons and evenings, then it's all right, because every other parent with a baby the same age is going through or has gone through a version of exactly what you're going through. You're not alone. Your baby is not broken, and you're not impaired as a parent. You don't suck at your job. You're doing a really, really good job. And if you know that, you're responding to your baby's needs as they come up, and co-regulating with your baby when they're having these intense periods of crying, then you are doing the absolute 150% maximum thing that you can do as a caregiver for that baby. So I want to make sure that you don't think that because you cannot easily soothe a baby who resists soothing, it doesn't mean that you're very bad at this job of parenting. Because quite frankly, by that definition, we'd all be terrible parents, and we're not. You're giving your baby exactly what they need and what they're asking for. And by around 3 to 5 months, that intense crying should start to peter out and completely go away. And your baby will be far more amenable, far more pleasant to be with. You know, I think there are some people who, this is the reason why they say, I don't really love newborns, I love older babies, you know, when they start becoming more active, because we sort of skip over that intense fussy stage of that period of purple crying. If you have any questions about the period of purple crying, I do recommend that purple crying .info website. purplecrying.info. You can go there. They have lots and lots of information. They've got videos. They have course programming information that you can use. They are funded by, oh my goodness, let me find the information again. They are funded by the National Center on Shaken Baby Syndrome in the US, which is a charitable organization that looks to reduce and eliminate abusive head trauma in babies, or what used to be called shaken baby syndrome. So that's where this sort of this rebranding of the idea of the colicky baby comes from. It comes from a genuine understanding that A, babies go through this, but B, it traumatizes parents, and sometimes a traumatized parent reacts in a way that they didn't intend to with a baby, and that can actually end up harming the baby, which is why we have these twin approaches of offering the baby soothing and then turning around and trying to reduce the stress for the parent and address that the feelings of being triggered, being traumatized that come up from intense and extremely frequent crying. So go to the website to find out more information. If you are going through this period right now and you desperately need a rest, or you desperately need a bit of companionship and help during the day to take care of your child, you can look for postpartum doula support, either during the day or overnight, as in an overnight nanny situation. And in Ottawa, that's Family Doulas of Ottawa. In Toronto, that's Toronto Family Doulas. And in Hamilton area, that is Hamilton Family Doulas. And you can bring in some respite care. So you can get maybe a few nights in a row where you sleep better, where someone else takes care of the baby, or a few times a week, you can have someone in helping you to take care of the baby so that you can also take care of yourself. Thanks. I know this was an intense topic, but I think it's a really important topic. It's one of the most common issues that parents face in this, like that sort of first half of a baby's life. And I think if we can all learn more skills about reducing stress for ourselves as parents and caregivers, then that'll end up helping our babies too. So thanks for joining us. Again, I'm Leanne from Hamilton Family Doulas. And next week, the wonderful Megan will be here to talk about raising inclusive kids, because June is a Pride Month. It's also Indigenous History Month. So a shout out to all of our queer community that is part of our family and out there as parents. Hi, we see you guys, and we love and support you. And for Indigenous History Month, I've been doing a lot more reading about or like taking in Indigenous culture in general. So if you are also a Canadian and interested in how you also can participate in Indigenous History Month, then you can look at increasing your amount of Indigenous content and entertainment that you use, helping to put eyes on Indigenous creators and putting money in the pockets of Indigenous creators throughout Canada. So thanks, everyone. I hope you're having a great week. Get in touch with us if you need any support. And if you have an idea for a future topic, let us know.